Howdy folks, Doc here with Last Best Tool, and today we're going to take a look at two knives. They're very similar in design, shape, essentially function, but one of them sells for like $250 more than the other. So what is really the difference? I'm often asked when I start handing out information on high-end cutlery, is it really worth it? That's a $300 knife or a $500 knife, or I've had a $1,000 knife. And these aren't custom knives. You're not talking about an artist's name on them that might have more value later. You're talking about a mass production knife. So what's really the difference? Let's take a look. Oh yeah, I set this here to remind myself. It's a Zippo lighter. Love the smell. Anyway, I don't smoke, but survival Zippo, brass. Anyway, what it reminded me is I wanted to circle back. I had mentioned using this lighter fluid as a solvent before I kind of scrape down things, stickers, etc., that are stuck. And first of all, I had a commenter that say, by the way, be careful because you might, if you're using a metal razor blade, say scraping away at something, you might make a spark, which you're using a flammable fluid in order to get rid of the solvent or get rid of the sticky. Yeah, that's true. I've never had that happen, but I also know that there are certain designed kind of things that people used in the janitorial profession in order to get rid of stickers, gum, all kinds of unintentional adhesives, which are also flammable. So just be aware of that. That was good advice. Anyway, this is my favorite, by the way. This Roncinol. Love this stuff. I noticed this Scripto here is also advertising and solvent. So it is going after both the lighter fluid and the kind of the solvent market. This stuff stinks. It does work, but it is, I don't know, I totally prefer this. My second choice, if I had to, is the Zippo lighter fluid. This is actually really clean, so it does work as a great solvent. It's second to Rossignol, and it's in a nice old school metal can. Oh, the other thing is, they often have a little kind of hooks. I've cut this one off, but I'll show you what goes on here. Here's another one. You can see I've already cut it off. So what I'm going to do is cut this one off in front of you. You can see they have a little hook here, and supposedly that's to keep maybe a kid from getting it. It makes it very difficult to open it. So what you can do, and I'll go ahead and use this Stanley knife, is I just go ahead and carefully slice this thing off. I haven't tried it on one of these Scriptos, but anyway, what it is a safety feature that I'm now defeating. Hope this doesn't get me a YouTube strike, but anyway, what it does is it gives me the ability to pop it up with my fingernail now. Before I couldn't do that. I'd have to use some nail or pin or something, but anyway. So I just wanted to circle back on that. Let's talk about knives. This particular video is going to address the differences between a $250, say, Benchmade and a $12, $13 Stanley. So let's start with just some surface features. As I open both of these up, you'll notice they have a similar profile. Both are using a black handle. They both have a pass-through design, which is easy to clean. They're both using a modified drop point blade with a swedge, an unsharpened swedge. You can see that. Hold both those up. The unsharpened swedge keeps them legal in a lot of areas. If you sharpen this, it becomes what's known as maybe a dirk or a dagger, and that can cause issues with law enforcement depending on your jurisdiction. The original Bowie knife, actually had a sharpened upper portion, which meant you could slice down and you could slice up. So if it was used in a fight, it would cut both ways. Cutting both ways is what attracted the singer David Bowie to that name. That's why he chose it, is because of the Bowie knife, or the Bowie knife, because it cut both ways. So you can, you know, assume the innuendo at that. But basically, what we've got are two very similar knives, similar thickness. They both have a thumb ramp, nice melded thumb ramp from the handle directly into the blade. This uses a coarser jimping. This is a finer jimping. They both use thumb studs as a deployment option. It turns out in this Stanley that's your only option unless you grab the blade, but there's no nail cut for it, so you can use the thumb stud. The Benchmade, you can use the thumb stud as well, but you can also release the tension on the blade by pulling the axis lock and then flicking it. And when you do that, you can launch the blade. Both of them have black handles. Both of them have standouts along the spine. Both of them have reasonably sharp blades. This one, the Stanley, does have a bit of a recurve right here. I do not care for that. It makes it harder to sharpen, and I don't like using it. But Kershaw, ZT, and other major knife companies are very quick to add a recurve. This is minor, but if you compare it here, you can see that the Benchmade has a nice kind of a straight or uniform shape all the way up until it reaches the drop point. The Stanley here has a bit of a dip here, which I don't like, but no big deal. They both use a torque screw pivot. They both have a lock. In the Benchmade's situation, it is a axis lock. It's a proprietary lock of Benchmade. It's my favorite lock. Stanley, on the other hand, here we go, is using a liner lock. It's one of the strongest locks possible. The only thing stronger, really, besides a proprietary lock, is a frame lock. And the frame lock actually has the external portion of the handle snapping in and locking the blade. But a liner lock is incredibly strong because it causes the blade to be locked into a point where there must be critical failure of the liner of the knife before the lock fails. In other words, you would have to apply so much force that you'd bend or deform the liner here, this steel piece, whereas others like lockbacks, you can just pop free a little indentation or something. So in that case, they're very similar. Let's look at the differences, because the prices are wildly different, even though both of them are mass-produced knives. So first of all, the Stanley, it's probably made with 440 or 420 stainless steel. I'm guessing 440. Real common, super simple, nothing exciting, and the heat treatment really has a lot to do with how well this steel performs. This Benchmade, on the other hand, uses a crucible steel. It's an S90V, which is a super steel, and it's a super duper steel in my opinion, because it's actually a upper end of the super steels, which means you're paying royalties to Crucible. It's designed specifically for knife blades, whereas this 440 stainless is used in all kinds of things: pots, pans, knife blades, car components, whatever it is. It's a good solid steel, probably state-of-the-art 30, 40 years ago. So what else? Well, this one's got the Benchmade has a knife designer's name on it. This is a Nakamura. It means that somebody spent time actually designing this knife before it got knocked off, and intellectual property rights be darned. And basically somebody made their prototypes. Benchmade bought into it, so there are royalties being paid, and that's part of the allure sometimes of the high-end knives. You can trace it down to a single person, whereas this, I can only trace this as far as China. That's where the story ends. As far as the handles, this is a plastic textured handle with a little bit of a rubbery texture, rubbery grip on it. Nothing to write home about. This one, on the other hand, is a carbon fiber grip with some index points for fingers, as well as a little bit of grip on the side. It's fairly thick, but you can also see it does have steel liners inside. This one, just a basic plastic bolted on. Now let's take a closer look at the standouts. And the standouts are these these points in the knife that give it stability beyond the pivot. So what do we have here? We have got the main pivots line up, both torque, so you can adjust the tension of the knife or the blade deployment. And then it's got equivalent standouts here. The Benchmade does use an aluminum blue texture or blue colored standout. One here as well. However, the Stanley no longer has one after that point, whereas the Benchmade continues along and applies one here, which means this gets a little bit of sponge at the end. Not as strong. Generally, that's not a critical point in a knife. If we close the blades and you look at the lineup, the Stanley slams up against the edge because there isn't a correctional point in the quality as this runs down the assembly line. If it's close enough, if it closes in and doesn't get caught on the edge, they probably call it good. Benchmade, on the other hand, tends to line up pretty much straight right down the middle, like a good landing. Benchmade makes sure of that. If they don't, you can send them in and they can make adjustments. But everything is uniform because it took a little bit longer. This was made by American hands in Oregon, Washington, Oregon, in the U.S. You know, people getting health care, people getting, workman's comp, people getting a solid paycheck and working wage, building these knives. Where does this come from? It comes from China, and that's the end of the story. I don't know where, I don't know who pays, how much for what workers. I don't know what their quality control is like. But what's the major difference? Well, they both cut. This one has got high-end materials. This has got, mundane materials. But because here in, 22% into the 21st century, I mean, Jiminy, you look out the window with binoculars and you can see the 23rd century coming up. This thing is actually pretty solid. It is going to do about everything you need it to do. You can sharpen this to paper cutting, hair cutting, not a big deal. Does it hold an edge as long, maybe, as this Benchmade? No. Does it get to the molecular sharpness of this Benchmade? No. Does it have the intricate beauty of the Benchmade, where you can tell people really care when they build this? No. But is it a solid knife? Actually, it is. So, you can get these used because they are discontinued for $10 to $20 on eBay. This one, on the other hand, because it's an investment, depending on the condition, this particular one you can get for approximately $275 to $350. So there's the difference between these two knives. If you want a working knife, is there anything wrong with this? No. It's a solid knife, and we have come a long way. We're not in the Copper Age or the Bronze Age or the Stone Age. We are in the Iron Age, and I'd argue the Stainless Steel Age. And stuff like this with a good liner lock is a solid performer. Is it at this level? No. But we are working probably in the last maybe 20 or 15% difference. This isn't beating on something with a chunk of obsidian. This isn't working with some old tool from the early 1900s. These are two high-end modern knives. There is a massive price difference between them, but don't feel bad about using something, modern that is not extremely valuable. On the other hand, this to me is pocket jewelry. That's why I carry it. This is an office tool. I just love it. It's beautiful. It makes me smile. I just love that somebody put that much thought and effort into a cutting tool. It's just dynamite, just amazing. However, if I'm going to go to work, nobody's going to notice the difference. Anyway, I thought I'd bring that up because people often ask about the difference between high-end or expensive cutlery and, you know, the kind of the run-of-the-mill stuff. That's the difference that I see. And if you are interested in higher-end tools, you know, I encourage you to explore those differences. It's a nuance, it's a taste that you have to develop usually. Otherwise, you don't know what you're getting. You might think I spent a bunch of money, but I didn't really get anything from it, because you don't know what those little tiny differences are, or anything about the guy who designed the knife, or the subtle differences. You notice that, you know, these are removable thumb studs versus not. You know, the carbon fiber, how it was formed versus whatever that material is. I don't know, might even be carcinogenic, who knows. You know, the additional standout, the pocket clip, all of these, you know, are because they're designed for people who appreciate that difference. So, working tool, totally fine. Working tool and jewelry, totally fine. With that, Doc out.